Okay, so there's this massive but kind of quiet revolution happening right now in global trade. And, it affects pretty much everything, from the price of the steel in your car to the shape of entire economies. So let's dive in and see how the rulebook for global trade is being totally torn up and rewritten.
Yeah, this quote right here, it really gets to the heart of it. For decades, we all thought of tariffs as just simple taxes, stuff countries negotiated. But that picture, it's just not the whole story anymore. So what have they evolved into? Well, the answer is carbon. Yeah, you heard that right. Carbon. The exact same thing we talk about at climate conferences is now somehow the single most important key to winning at global trade. And that's creating a whole new lineup of winners and losers on the world stage. For the longest time, trade and carbon were kept in two totally separate boxes. You had the trade talks over here and the climate policy talks way over there. Well, the walls between those boxes are just collapsing. And that collapse, it's changing literally everything.
Okay, so how does this new system actually work on the ground? Well, the most fundamental change is this massive pivot. We're shifting from judging what a product is to judging how that product was actually made.
And the difference here is, well, it's huge. Think about it. Traditional tariffs were super blunt. You import a car, you pay a tax. Simple, right? But these new carbon tariffs, they're way more sophisticated. They get right into the nitty-gritty of your production process and tax you based on your emissions. So it's not just about the product anymore. It's about its entire carbon story from start to finish.
And what this does is create a massive power shift. Suddenly, countries with really strict climate rules can basically export their costs to other countries. And here's the clever part. Because it's all framed as an environmental issue, it's really, really hard to call it what it might look like, old school protectionism. It's a seriously potent new kind of economic leverage. So in the real world, this means our borders are totally transforming. They're basically becoming carbon checkpoints. It's like every single product now needs an emissions passport just to get through customs.
Let's just walk through how this would work. So imagine a big shipment of steel or fertilizers shows up at a port. Customs officials now have to assess its embedded carbon. That's just a fancy way of saying the total carbon footprint of making it. They're going to demand verified, hard data on exactly how much CO2 was emitted. And if that data is wrong, or worse, just not there, that shipment could get hit with delays, big penalties, or even be turned away completely.
Think about this for a second. For decades, the most important question in trade was always, where was this made, the country of origin? Now, there's a new question that's just as important. How much carbon did it take to make this? This isn't a small tweak. It's a monumental shift in the actual DNA of global trade.
So, as you can probably imagine, a change this huge creates a whole new kind of battlefield. And on this battlefield, what used to be a country's biggest economic advantage can suddenly become its greatest weakness.
Just think about those major export economies, right? The ones that built their success on cheap, energy-intensive manufacturing. For years, that was the engine driving their incredible growth. But now, that exact same high-carbon model puts a giant bullseye on their back for these new carbon tariffs. Their biggest strength just flipped and became a massive financial liability.
And this gets to the real tension at the heart of all this. From the perspective of countries like India, China, or Brazil, it feels like the rules of the game are being changed right at the end. I mean, they industrialized using a model that the world rewarded for decades, cheap production. Now they feel like they're being punished for it. So they're asking a pretty fair question. Is this really about climate action, or is it just green protectionism, a new backdoor way to block our goods?
Okay, and this brings us to a really critical point, and one that's easy to overlook. In this new world of trade, power isn't just about who's the best negotiator anymore. It's about who has the best data. Seriously, forget the old world of backroom deals and diplomatic handshakes. That's all being replaced by spreadsheets, databases, and verification reports. If you can't prove your emissions with cold, hard data, you are at a huge disadvantage. It doesn't matter who you know or what deals you've made in the past. And that's exactly why this term, emissions data governance, is suddenly becoming so critical for businesses. It's basically the skill of being able to measure, report, and verify your emissions for every single product. Because here's the kicker. If you show up at that border checkpoint with missing or incomplete data, customs will often just assume the absolute worst-case scenario and hit you with the highest possible penalty.
So, tracking your carbon footprint, it's no longer some nice-to-have thing that the sustainability department puts in an annual report. No way. It is now just as operationally critical as your financial accounting. It's about tracking dollars and cents, and now, tons of carbon. So where is all of this heading? What's the big picture? Well, the long-term forecast points to a fundamental reorganization of the entire global economy. We could be heading towards a world of competing carbon blocks.
Just picture it. We're probably looking at a future where supply chains get completely rerouted to find the suppliers with the lowest emissions. A future where nearshoring, moving manufacturing closer to home, isn't just a political buzzword, but a practical move to get better data transparency. And of course, a future with rising geopolitical backlash against so-called green protectionism, which could split the world into different trade zones, each with its own carbon rulebook. It would make global trade way, way more complicated.
And that brings us to the number one thing you need to remember from all this. For any company that operates internationally, getting ready for this new world isn't a sustainability issue, it's a trade strategy issue. It's about survival. And the winners? Well, they won't necessarily be the greenest companies. They'll be the ones with the best data and the smartest strategy to play by these new rules. So here's a final thought. The next big trade war, it's not going to start with a fight over traditional tariffs. It's going to start with a fight over emissions data. The battles of the future will be fought in databases, through verification systems, and at those new carbon checkpoints. The new frontier of trade, it's all about the data.